From the outside, my wedding was perfect. The laughter. The music. The rich aroma of egusi soup floating through the air. Guests toasted to our future, clapped as we danced, and whispered blessings in Yoruba and Hausa. But underneath the glamour, behind the chiffon and gold, something sinister brewed in the kitchen pot. Something deadly. I never imagined that my greatest threat wouldn't be a stranger, but the very people I had called family. And what happened next was something no one at that wedding would ever forget. My name is Amara, a 27-year-old teacher from Anambra State, raised by my widowed mother and grandmother. I had always believed in hard work, decency, and love. That was how I met Chinedu, during a local outreach where he volunteered as a doctor. He was charming, gentle, and most importantly, he respected me. It didn't take long before we fell in love. He proposed within a year, and I said yes with tears in my eyes. But behind Chinedu's warmth was a family that never truly welcomed me. His mother, Mama Nkechi, carried herself like royalty, a woman with sharp words and eyes that never smiled. His two sisters, Adaora and Nneka, barely hid their contempt for me. They often mocked my Igbo accent, saying I wasn't classy enough for someone like Chinedu. I tried to overlook it. Love, I believed, would conquer all. As the wedding drew closer, the tension worsened. Chinedu noticed but brushed it off, insisting, "They'll come around. You'll see." They never did. During the wedding planning, Mama Nkechi inserted herself into everything, the guest list, the colors, even the soup. She insisted we serve family-prepared food, especially her special goat meat egusi soup, a family tradition, she said. My mother, out of respect, stepped back. On the morning of the wedding, I woke with a strange heaviness in my chest. Not nerves. Not excitement. Something unexplainable. I brushed it off. The ceremony was beautiful. My gown shimmered in the sunlight as we exchanged vows under a hibiscus-decorated arch. Our friends cheered. My mother wept. Chinedu held my hand like I was made of gold. Then came the reception. The open-air hall was filled with song and joy. Trays of food floated from table to table. Waiters in green and white uniforms passed plates like gospel, and laughter echoed under the afternoon sky. I barely touched my food. Something still felt wrong. Then, the scream. A blood-curdling cry tore through the music. It came from the high table, where Chinedu's younger sister, Nneka, sat, sipping her soup. She clutched her throat, her face twisted in agony. Her eyes bulged. People froze, spoons midair. Then she began to convulse, knocking over plates and chairs. The band stopped playing. Guests rushed forward. Chinedu leapt to her side. "Mama! Do something," he shouted, cradling her head. Mama Nkechi stood frozen, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Paramedics were called. Nneka was rushed to the nearest hospital. The wedding was thrown into chaos. Guests began murmuring, some praying, others fleeing. I stood there, numb, as my mother clutched me. It wasn't until later that night, in the dim waiting room of the local hospital, that the truth came out. Nneka had been poisoned. Deliberately. The doctor, a stout man with weary eyes, said she'd ingested something extremely toxic, possibly rat poison or something similar. He was blunt, "If she survives, it'll be a miracle." I looked at Chinedu, his face pale. Then at his mother, who sat stone-faced beside him. Something clicked inside me. The soup. She was the only one who ate it from that particular pot. The same pot Mama Nkechi insisted must be served only at the couple's table. The one meant for me. I returned home in silence, still in my wedding gown, smeared with dust and tears. My mind raced. Why would they poison the soup? Why would Nneka end up eating it? At dawn, I met Mama Nkechi at the hospital again. This time, she avoided my gaze. Adora clung to her phone, whispering frantically. Then I overheard something that shattered me. She wasn't supposed to eat it. It was meant for her. Her voice cracked. I turned. Our eyes met. Adora froze. Mom Nkechi's lips parted slightly, as if to stop her daughter, but it was too late. My mother, standing beside me, gripped my arm. What did you just say? I asked, my voice trembling. No one answered. I repeated, louder this time, who was it meant for? Chinedu turned, confused. What are you talking about? There was silence. Then, quietly, Mom Nkechi whispered. She doesn't belong in this family. We were trying to protect you, Chinedu. They confessed, at least enough. Mom Nkechi had hired a cook, someone from her village, and instructed her to add something to a special bowl of soup. A traditional charm, she said, to prevent spiritual compatibility issues. But it was no charm. It was poison. Their logic was delusional. They believed I was a curse, a bad omen who would ruin Chinedu's future. Their plan was to quietly eliminate me, let the village blame spiritual attack or food allergy. Weddings are chaotic, after all. But Nneka, in her arrogance, had eaten the soup first. She liked to sample the dishes before anyone else. No one noticed when she picked up the wrong bowl. Now she lay in a coma. I was heartbroken, horrified, but mostly numb. Chinedu was in shock. He screamed at his mother, punched the wall, collapsed in tears. You tried to kill my wife, on our wedding day? Mom Nkechi broke down, but her tears held more fear than remorse. In the following days, investigations were launched. The cook was arrested. She confessed everything. Mom Nkechi and Adora were named as co-conspirators. The wedding story spread like wildfire. Newspapers printed headlines like Mother-in-law poisons bride, daughter nearly dies, and wedding tragedy in Enugu state. Shame fell upon the family. Businesses linked to them suffered boycotts. Their neighbors wouldn't even greet them. And me? I never moved in with Chinedu. I needed space. Healing. We continued to speak, but I told him I couldn't be with a man whose family tried to kill me, no matter how innocent he was. 3 months later, Nneka woke from her coma, brain damaged, unable to speak properly. She would never walk the same again. Justice came, not just through courts, but through consequence. I went back to teaching, to caring for my mother, to therapy. That experience scarred me, but it taught me something powerful. Evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it wears a ghillie and serves you soup with a smile. Sometimes, blood means nothing. And trust? It must be earned, not inherited. How many brides are smiling at the altar while someone plots behind the scenes? How many are walking into families that wish them dead, simply because of where they come from? If love is blind, then marriage better have eyes wide open. Because not every wedding begins a fairy tale, some nearly end in a funeral. The days following the revelation moved in a blur of disbelief, pain, and legal proceedings. Mom Nkechi and Adora were formally charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. The cook confessed that she was paid to carry out the deed. She was told it was merely a harmless spiritual deterrent, something to make me vomit and go back to my people. But no one believed that story anymore, not after the toxicology report. Chinedu was broken. He begged for forgiveness, standing at my gate one evening with red eyes and trembling hands. Amara, I didn't know. I swear on my life, I didn't. I know, I interrupted gently. But I can't pretend that nothing happened. There was a long pause. I still love you, he whispered. I loved him too. But how do you build a future with someone whose own mother tried to end your life? Nneka remained hospitalized. Her condition improved slightly, but her speech was slurred, and she could no longer remember portions of the wedding day. Her legs twitched with effort as she attempted to walk again. Her once sharp tongue had been silenced, perhaps permanently. For Mom Nkechi, watching her favorite daughter suffer was punishment enough. Her hands trembled when she saw Nneka's blank stare. No judge needed to explain what she had done. Her soul knew it, and it would never forget. The community, once filled with admiration for the prestigious Okonkwo family, now shunned them. Their family compound became a ghost house. The gates, once flanked by security guards, stood open. Dust gathered at the doorstep. Even beggars avoided it. Women from the market called Mama Nkechi Alu an abomination. The church removed her from the women's union. Her reputation, once built over decades, crumbled in weeks. My mother often reminded me, forgiveness is divine, Amara. But forgiveness does not mean return. She was right. I declined Chinedu's offer to try again, at least not now. I needed distance, not for revenge, but for healing. For clarity. The near-death experience made me realize that sometimes, love must be weighed against safety and dignity. I continued my teaching, launched a small podcast called Silent Knives where I shared true African stories of betrayal, jealousy, and healing, anonymously, of course. It became popular. Women wrote in, sharing their own experiences. Many had suffered quietly, poisoned not with soup, but with words, neglect, manipulation. I was no longer just a victim. I had become a voice. Months passed, and life moved on, but not without shadows. The trial became a public affair. Mom Nkechi and Adora stood in court, faces pale under their expensive headscarves. They pleaded for mercy, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, a cultural mistake. But the evidence was too strong. The cook testified. Voice recordings surfaced. Even Chinedu, under oath, admitted hearing Adora speak in whispers about dealing with the girl before she ruins our bloodline. The judge's words were cold. Poisoning is not culture. It is murder in slow motion. They were sentenced to 12 years in prison with no option of fine. The courtroom gasped. Mama Nkechi fainted. I sat quietly, not out of satisfaction, but out of finality. Justice had spoken. One quiet evening, just before I packed to move to Abuja for a new teaching role, Chinedu visited again. This time, he brought no flowers. Only a box. I kept some of the wedding pictures, he said, placing it gently on the bench beside me. I don't know what to do with them. I opened the lid. There we were, smiling, glowing, two people caught in a beautiful lie. The images felt like ghosts now. I've decided to leave the country for a while, he added. Maybe I need to rebuild too. I nodded. You should. We didn't cry. We didn't kiss. We just sat there, two hearts with scar tissue. Do you hate me? He asked. No, I said. But I'm finally learning to love myself more. Weeks later, my story aired anonymously on a national radio segment, a woman's voice actor narrating my tale. The host ended it with a chilling quote. Not all enemies live outside your house. Some stir your soup with smiling hands. People called in, shared tears, prayers, anger. But more importantly, they listened. Because mine wasn't just a wedding gone wrong. It was a reflection of how jealousy, tribalism, pride, and desperation can turn family into predators. So if you're planning to marry into a family, ask yourself. Would they protect you, or poison you? Would they share in your joy, or stir your destruction? And most of all, if love is food, and marriage the feast, who's really stirring the pot? Because sometimes, the first person to taste the soup isn't the one it was cooked for. And in that moment, truth boils over, and burns everything in its path.